Thank you for this wonderful presentation. When God-given skills, artistic talents are harmonized with heartfelt devotion and compassion, it has the effect of transforming our hearts and our lives. And Gaurvani, Janavi Jivana Devi, you have transformed our lives. Thank you. You were speaking and bringing us on this very old, time-beaten cargo ship, the Jaladuta, at the time when our beloved spiritual teacher, Srila Prabhupada, was about to arrive in New York City. I'd like to go back approximately 53 years ago to when Srila Prabhupada boarded the Jaladuta at the King George dockyards in Calcutta. On the 50th anniversary occasion, on the actual day he boarded Jaladuta, on the very auspicious occasion of Friday the 13th of August, 1965, I happened to be with Srila Prabhupada's son, Vrindavan Chandra Day. In Srila Prabhupada's diary, he writes, there were 4 people that came to see him off. 3 of them worked for the steamship company. It wasn't anything, we're seeing a saint off. It was their duty. And the other was his son. Because Srila Prabhupada was 69 years old. As Gaurvani explained, he had such a compassion in his heart because he was seeing what the world was coming to. Very interesting, in the 1940s, Srila Prabhupada was writing some articles for a magazine that he was himself kind of publishing. There wasn't many copies. But he at that time could see so much of what struggles we were having as a planet today. He was talking about the artificial danger of depending on oil, and how the dependency on the world on oil was going to create tremendous greed. It's going to create ecological, environmental crisis, and could even incite wars. Now in the 1940s, gasoline was about 20 cents a gallon or less. In the 1960s, when I first started driving cars, it was 25 cents a gallon. Nobody thought in those days that there's going to be a shortage. But from a spiritual perspective, he could understand that there's no sustenance in exploitation. Unless we honor and respect the sacred property of God and Mother Earth, unless we learn to honor and respect all living beings as our brothers, our sisters, the children of the same source, Krishna, God, then it's unsustainable. It will bring about quarrel, hypocrisy, and so much suffering. I don't know if anybody was talking about climate change in those days, but Prabhupada was. Because he cared. He cared deeply. If a person has a particular disease, it's a type of caring to treat the symptoms. But if you really care, along with the symptoms, you'll treat the cause of the disease. And it is a universal truth that the cause of the illnesses that the world faces today and has always faced is avidya. It's ignorance, it's darkness. The Bible tells, what profiteth a person who gets the whole world but loses their eternal soul? The Bhagavad Gita tells that knowledge is like light. It begins by understanding. Bhoktaram jagatapasam sarva loka maheshwaram suradam sarva bhutanam gyatva mam shanti mrichchati. We are the living force within this body. Najayate mriyate vakatachat. When we understand how everything is the property of the Supreme, then we could live in peace. So Srila Prabhupada understood from this perspective that the problems of the environment, the sociological problems of prejudice and racism, and so many other forms of exploitation were due to a spiritual disease. We're disconnected. Today I was speaking to a very well-known musician, and we were talking about the mind. How much difficulty the mind could cause us. So we tried to describe things in such a way that could really connect to people, according to what's relevant to them. So I said, in your band, if you play your guitar and the strings are not tuned to be in harmony with each other, what is your guitar going to sound like? And if all the different instruments of your band are playing in different keys, they're not in tune with each other, it's going to sound discord. It's going to disturb us rather than give us a sense of pleasure. So the purpose of religion, the purpose of spirituality, the purpose of yoga is harmony. To harmonize the body with the mind, with the heart, the seat of love, and with the soul, the source of life. To tune in to the true loving nature of the heart and soul. And when that harmony is there, then our actions, our words, and even our thoughts will create a beautiful vibration to bring harmony and peace and happiness into the world. But if there's a discord within our own minds, our own hearts, it's going to create greed and envy and selfishness and passion and anger and so much illusion. And on practically all levels of society, that's what we're seeing today. When Srila Prabhupada boarded the Jaladuta in 1965, he understood that New York City had become the most influential city in the world. And if somehow or other he could bring this message to New York, then as a seva, as a service, he can help give light to the world. So Gauravani explained he had to beg for a ticket. And somehow or other he got it. And his son Vrindavan Chandra Day told me the night before his the boat was going to leave, a 38-day voyage. He was 69 years old at the time. He was staying in a free little dharamshala or guest house where sadhus or holy people would stay. And he had no way to get to the boat. He called his son and said, "Could you take me there?" And his son, rented a taxi and went to his father's and brought him to the boat. And the two of them boarded the boat together. And the boat was late in its departure. It's kind of the tradition of India for things to be late. I like to justify that I've lived in India for a long time, so please tolerate my punctuality. So they sat and talked together in this little, very, very tiny, simple little cabin that Prabhupada was given to stay. It was a cargo ship. There was no passengers. It was all workers. The workers and Srila Prabhupada. And then when the whistle blew, the boat was about to leave. And Prabhupada said to his son that I don't think the rupees I have will be exchanged in America. They don't like rupees. He said, here, he gave him 40 rupees, gave to his son. And then his son embraced his father and went down off the ship and saw the ship departing. And I asked Vrindavan Chandra Day, what did you think when your father, who really had nothing, he didn't know anyone, he was quite old, what were you feeling when the boat started moving away? He said, I honestly knew that I would never see my father again. Then he started to cry. And he said, I was so proud of him. Because I could understand he was doing it all out of deep compassion and love for humanity and all beings. There was no other motivation. He had nothing to gain. He only had something to give. As was described at the beginning of the voyage on the Arabian Sea, Srila Prabhupada had 2 heart attacks and extreme seasickness. And he wrote that beautiful song that was sung to us when he was just approaching the Boston harbor, where they went through the immigrations, and then the agents came on the ship, the immigrations, then they went to New York. And it was around in Boston, it was in New York, that he sent a Western Union telegram to his son, because he just had heart attacks. He didn't have any money for medicine. Didn't know any doctors. He somehow or other got the captain, Pandey, to give him enough money to send a Western Union telegram to his son. And he wrote, "Go in Calcutta to this street." In India, they're called chemist shops. Here they're called pharmacies. He said, "Go to this chemist shop. Go to this particular person who works there and ask him for this particular Ayurvedic medicine." So the son immediately went there and then shipped it to his father in Butler, Pennsylvania. And Vrindavan Chandra again started crying. He said the cost of buying the medicine and shipping it to my father was 40 rupees. Exactly what he gave me minutes before his departure. So after about a month of living in at the YMCA hotel in Butler, Pennsylvania, he came to New York. I remember he told us one day he woke up and the whole block around him was painted white. He was thinking, what have they done? They painted everything white. Then he went outside to see it, and it was the first experience of him of seeing snow. And he had no warm clothes. He's from Calcutta. But he didn't give up, because I guess like a parent, when a parent loves, a mother loves a child, she'll never give up in trying to help the child. That's the nature of compassion. Any little thing that was positive, he was so enthusiastic. And even when there was nothing positive, he was enthusiastic. He met one young boy who said, come and stay with me. He lived in a loft in the Bowery. In those days, Bowery was a ghetto, a dangerous ghetto. And Prabhupada was giving class to 2-3 people who were coming. And then the person took LSD and became crazy and threatened to kill Prabhupada, so he was on the street. And somebody who just happened to come to the Bowery to meet him helped Prabhupada to find this little storefront on 26 2nd Avenue in the Lower East Side. Prabhupada brought with him about 100 or so of a 3-volume set of the first canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. It took him years in India to write it himself. He typed every word on this little manual typewriter. He edited it. He had to convince people to give him paper. That was really difficult in those days in India, to get paper. He had to convince the publisher to do it for free. And as they were sold, he would pay him back. So it took years. And about 8 months of whatever little he could sell here, it was whatever he saved in 8 months was exactly the rent for the first month of 26 2nd Avenue. Prabhupada gave it all. How was he going to pay the next month rent? He just left that to the higher powers of Krishna's grace, God's will. It was a humble beginning. I have talked to people from England, from India, from Russia, They go to that little storefront just across around the block from us today. It's nothing impressive to see. But hundreds, thousands of people, they go in front of it and they weep, they cry, because they understand the meaning of that place. In the Lower East Side of New York, that little storefront, Prabhupada wanted to distribute prasad or food. But he had no money. He had no followers. But a dozen, 2 dozen, 3 dozen people would come because he had a little sign, Bhagavad Gita class. They'd come, and someone would give him an apple. And at the end of Prabhupada's talk, he would count how many people were there and cut the apple in exactly that many slices and offer the apple to Krishna because he had such faith in the power of Krishna's grace. And then he would, with his own hand, distribute a little slice of apple to everyone. That was all. From that humble beginning, the Hare Krishna movement since then has distributed over 2 billion full plates or meals of prasad. It began, Prabhupada had that faith in the power of God's grace, giving out those little apple slices. Prabhupada spent years writing a manuscript for Bhagavad Gita. And when it was complete, it was stolen. And there were no other copies. He started all over again. When he was there on 26 2nd Avenue, one day he took a walk down Houston Street. And there was a young man, early 20s, happened to see, it's not 1966, it wasn't so common to see Swamis in New York City, especially in the Lower East Side. So he ran up to him. He said, "Are you coming from India?" And Prabhupada said, "Yes, are you?" The person didn't understand. So then he brought him and said, "Let me show you something. This is my little storefront. I'm giving classes. Please come, bring some friends." It's really hard. There was hardly anyone coming. So he came. He was charmed by this elderly gentleman. And he came back into Prabhupada's little room. And he told Prabhupada he was an English teacher. He said, "Oh, you are English teacher? You know editing?" He said, "Yes." He said, "Could you help me with some editing?" He said, "Sure, I'd like to." So he gave him a stack of papers that were bound with, what do you call, like baling, like what you, twine, because that's the way they do it in India. They just take just stack of paper and tie it. And he gave it to him. He said, "Could you do that?" And he said, "Sure." And then Prabhupada said, "When you finish that," and he opened up trunks with hundreds of stacks of papers, tens of thousands of pages wrapped up with twines. He said, "When you finish this, you could do this too." And it was just one person he just met the day before. And he wasn't even a student. From that little beginning, Srila Prabhupada's, which took place right around the corner, more Bhagavad Gitas have been published of Srila Prabhupada's translations and purports than any in the history of the world, Bhagavad Gita. Tens, hundreds of millions of books. in almost every language of the world have been distributed. And it all started right here with that appeal to a stranger in Tompkins Square Park. Prabhupada would sit down with a little bongo drum that somebody gave him and sing the Hare Krishna mantra. And little by little, one person came and sat with him and chanted, and then 2 people, and then 3 people, and then Prabhupada taught them, you can dance like this, and then every now and then somebody would dance, and this little crowd of people just looking like, what is happening here? From that humble beginning, 3 years later, George Harrison and Yamuna Devi, one of the devotees who met Prabhupada here at 26 2nd Avenue, she sang the Hare Krishna mantra. George Harrison recorded it and played guitar. It was the #1 record in many of the countries of Europe, and it was in the top 10 for a long time in England. And today, if you go to Russia, there's kirtans with 15,000 people chanting Hare Krishna. In India, I've been to events where there's hundreds of thousands of people at one time chanting Hare Krishna. And in Ukraine, and all over the world. It all started with one little man with nothing and no one sitting under a tree. It was so beautifully recited in the presentation before. The verse where Srila Prabhupada he has one prayer. Now, if you're going to a place, you're 70 years old, you're going to a country, you've never left India before, first time out of the country, you know no one, you have nothing, no insurance, no doctors, what would you pray? Be honest. You don't have to tell anybody else, but just ask yourself, what would you pray? Probably pray, please have somebody there that will feel sorry for me. Give me food. Give me a place to stay, something. Prabhupada's prayer was, Krishna, my beloved Lord, my sweet Lord, let me be a puppet of your mercy. Give me the words to speak so that I can help, I could assist you, my Lord, in making people happy. Real happiness. That was his only prayer. In that situation, he was praying for us. The greatest power in all of creation is the power of love. And the greatest force of love is God's love. Prabhupada was praying, let me be a puppet dancing on the strings of your love to make others happy. Over the years, this miracle of compassion, we ponder it, we meditate on it. Why are great personalities, and I sometimes study this in my own heart, in every serious spiritual tradition in the world, it began with so with the founders going through so much tribulation. In slavery, stranded in a wilderness for 40 years, practically no food, no shelter, armies coming to attack, persecution, crucifixion. Every tradition I've ever studied, its beginnings were like that. And the message is clear, that these people, they had such deep compassion, and their compassion was illustrated through their willingness to almost happily go through anything to help us. To give love, to take nothing, but to give love, to give compassion, to give meaning, truth, happiness, spiritual happiness to the world. Over the years, this bhakti movement has spread incredibly in places like Russia. 1971, Prabhupada went to Russia during the Iron Curtain, the communism. He wasn't allowed to speak to anyone, but he secretly met his assistant, was walking down the street, and one Russian boy saw him and said, "Are you from America?" And he said, "Yes." He said, "Do you have blue jeans or records of rock and roll?" He said, "No, but I have a guru. Would you like to meet him?" He said, "Yes, well, if Americans have it, then I'd like to do it too." So Prabhupada just explained the science of bhakti to this person for a couple days, and then Prabhupada had to leave. But that one person created an explosion, which gradually, Sri Radhika is one such person, and there's so many people here from Russia, Ukraine, and Lithuania, and all of these countries. From that one little person that Prabhupada just patiently explained things, hundreds and thousands of people, millions of books of spiritual literatures. In India, there's hundreds of Hare Krishna temples now, and millions of people. Africa. But somehow or other, for some mysterious reason, nothing's happened in New York for decades. We've practically been completely forgotten. Because people are going all over the world, no one in New York. But somehow or other, by our good fortune, this little building and a few very, very sincere people came together as a tribute to Prabhupada, as a tribute to the compassion of the path of bhakti, to create a cultural center where our hope and our mission is everyone and anyone could feel welcome, could feel a spiritual home. We're praying and hoping and striving that here there could be a spiritual family where people are not judged, because the very principle of bhakti is to see the sacredness in everyone's heart. to see that little spark of divinity and to fan it, to bring out the best, to bring out the divine in each other. That's how Prabhupada began, and that's how this wonderful bhakti movement has spread it throughout the world. And here in the Bhakti Center, we're trying to be instruments of that revival. And that's what tonight's event is about, just sharing. And I'll end with a simple little story. It's a story I've probably told thousands of times because it's so simple. In fact, sometimes when I travel places, I see little children and they run up and say, "Tell that story again." Can I tell it? Again? Hanuman. Hanuman, very powerful, very intelligent, very devoted. He's the symbol of bhakti. He was helping Ram to build a bridge across the Indian Ocean. Because Sita, the beloved Mother Earth, the beloved mother of devotion, mother of love, she was kidnapped and exploited. And Ram was trying to reach her. But he had to cross an ocean. And there was an arrangement where they could take rocks and stones and make them float in the ocean to create a bridge. And Hanuman, his enthusiasm was unbelievable. He would jump to a distant place and pick up an entire mountain and come back and put it in the water. He would gigantic boulders that were tens and thousands of pounds, tons, and would place it in the ocean. They did it with selfless compassion. He was getting nothing for himself. He was doing it as a seva to Sita, because Sita's beloved of Ram. Every living being is a beloved of Ram. That's bhakti. And while he was carrying a massive boulder of stone, there was a little spider. The spider was, with his little leg, kicking one grain of sand at a time as hard as he could, with all his strength going. It wasn't even that loud. You know, I have a microphone. He says like, kicking grain, and then getting enough strength, and then resting and getting enough strength, and then finding another grain of sand and going. And he's standing in front of Hanuman. And Hanuman's not going to step on a spider, because he respects the sacredness, the divinity, and the life of all beings. So Hanuman told the spider, "Please get out of my way. I have this, I'm building the bridge." And Ram told Hanuman that spider is doing as much as you are. Because it's not the quantity, it's the quality of one's intention that gives anything its value. And you have the power to lift mountains. You're doing everything you can. And the spider is doing everything she can. The grain of sand. And that's what makes life beautiful. Not when we compare ourselves to others. If we do that, we could either be arrogant, or we could be depressed, or we could be angry, or we can envious. But life is beautiful when we have a noble cause, the cause of love, the cause of devotion to Krishna, compassion to others. And we're doing our part, whatever we can. Patram pushpam palam toyam. With love and devotion. Thank you very much.